This is the second video about the textual analysis essay assignment. In this one, we are going to be looking at the requirements of the genre. What does a textual analysis essay look like? It does have a particular essay structure. If you walk with me through this essay structure, then we'll look at a couple of specific examples so you can see how to structure your essay. The top and the bottom are predictable. You begin with your introduction, briefly introduce your readers to your text, a couple of the main issues, and then you end with your thesis. This introduction is about half a page, generally speaking. First body paragraph. In another roughly half a page, you're going to give an overview of your text. What does it look like? What does it sound like? What kind of a text is it? You can see in half a page, it's going to be an overview. Then, remember we talked context. What kind of background information is necessary for your readers to understand your text? If you're discussing a text that depicts some historical event, you're going to need to give us that history from a history book, some independent source, something outside of your text. If you are looking at a text that depicts some specific location, then if you're doing the interview, the movie that talks about North Korea, you're going to need to give us some information about North Korea. That's necessary historical context. So there are those kinds of questions. That's the second body paragraph. Then the rest of your body paragraphs, each one brings up one issue or one complaint or one controversy that is connected with your text. When people talk about your text, what's one thing that they bring up? You do each of those in their own body paragraphs. In that body paragraph, then, you begin describing what that controversy is. Then you briefly describe, summarize, quote the part of your text that includes that issue. And then you tell us what other people have said about the issue. You end those body paragraphs talking about your stance. Which of these people do you think says the most reasonable thing? What is the best way to wrap up the disagreements or this controversy that people have on this one issue about your text? Then last but not least, you've got your conclusion. You're going to revisit each of the issues, and then you end with some sort of a recommendation. Is this a good text, an important text? Why or why not? And you're going to want that recommendation to be specific, and it's probably going to tie back to your thesis statement. So, if we look at one example, let's take the Martin Luther King Jr. statue in Washington, D.C. It's on the National Mall. It's a very huge, imposing statue. What are some of the... Well, if we start at the beginning of our essay structure, your first description body paragraph is going to give us this overview. What's part of the memorial? There's a statue of him. There's these two other stones. There's quotes from his speeches all over these stones. That's going to be your first body paragraph. Second body paragraph. Remember, that is whatever background information is necessary for people to understand. Again, it is half a page to 3/4 of a page. If we're looking at this Martin Luther King Jr. memorial in Washington, D.C., you're going to have to give us a brief biography of Martin Luther King Jr. When did he live? When did he die? Why is there a memorial of him? That's the second body paragraph. In each of the other body paragraphs, you're going to bring up one of the controversies connected with this memorial. One of them you maybe can identify right off the bat here. This is the first memorial to a person of color on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. There are memorials to Lincoln, to Washington, other people. This is the first one to a person of color. Some people complain, don't like the fact that it's in white stone. Why white stone when it is a memorial to a person of color? The other side argues that all the other memorials, if you think about them, they're all out of the same white stone. That's why they chose it. But you can see all of those debates would go into one paragraph. You'd source them. You'd talk about them. Other things. Some people do not like the look on his face. They don't like his body posture. He's kind of closed off. Maya Angelou said that he looks arrogant. Other people have said that he looks angry, and that this wasn't who he was. This wasn't how they want him to look. So you would discuss that in a paragraph. Discuss both sides. His family says it's fine. So there are two sides to this as well. What else? If you notice his feet, some people really don't like the fact that he is not a freestanding statue. He is still partially stuck in the stone. Some people say this is good because he was assassinated. He is not able to walk anymore. He is not able to finish the work that he started. We need to be his feet. Other people really just dislike the fact that he's stuck in the stone. They think it makes him look captive and somehow sort of incapable. So you can see each one of those issues would be brought up in a separate body paragraph. You'd have sources and what they say about it in that body paragraph. And then you get to your conclusion, you summarize those things, and you say, do you think overall, is this a good memorial? Why or why not? That's your recommendation at the end. Let's look at all of this with pieces of an actual student essay that somebody turned in. So, introduction, their thesis statement was, and this is about Washington crossing the Delaware. Famous painting. You've probably seen it. It shows up in just about every history textbook that there is. This student's thesis was, while many people love the painting Washington crossing the Delaware, others say it has no place in textbooks because of the artistic choices made and the glorification of both War and Washington himself. This is a good thesis statement, by the way, for this kind of an essay, because while it seems kind of long, it is basically a two-part thesis in a logical sense. It's not a list thesis, notice. We're not saying we're going to cover this, 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 and this. It says some people love it, other people hate it because. All right. First body paragraph, as we said, description of the painting. Second body paragraph, historical context. What do we know about Washington and crossing the Delaware, and why was he doing it, and what was going on? If you recall, it was a famous battle in the Revolutionary War, one of the first big ones that Washington won. He basically snuck over, I've forgotten right now if it was Christmas or Christmas Eve. He snuck over in the middle of the night. The other side had been partying a lot, and Washington stomped on them. That would be body paragraph 2, the historical context. Then from there we go into the body paragraphs that look at essentially what's wrong with the painting. What are the debates and the discussions? First one, talking about the people in the boat. The argument here is that there's a wide variety of people in the boat, and Washington was the most important general in the Revolutionary Army. He would not have been surrounded by a whole bunch of different kinds of people. He would have had his people around him, his immediate troops, so that this is, the painter chose to have different kinds of people to make it look more like a representative democracy, but it's a historical inaccuracy. Then apparently this is the wrong flag. There's a problem. Then I've given you an entire paragraph here so you can see how it goes along. So this paragraph is looking at inaccuracies in physical details. We have that in our first sentence. For one thing, Washington's crossing took place in the middle of the night. He intentionally chose a night with no moon so it would be harder for the British to see his troops in the middle of the river. Use of a source there. In the painting, however, there's plenty of light. You can see everyone's faces clearly and the boats that are part of the crossing. Obviously, it would be hard to paint something that's pitch black, but still it's not an accurate depiction of a historical event. So notice we have use of source, we have description in a small way of the painting, again, the particular details that are being talked about, and then some analysis of that. On top of this, the boats that carried Washington's troops did not carry horses or big guns. No one with good sense would put a horse or a cannon into a rowboat. You know this yourself if you've ever been in a small boat. Washington sent both of them over on ferries. Another physical inaccuracy is the kind of ice in the river. When the Delaware freezes, the ice forms in big sheets, not in the big iceberg-like chunks that we see in the painting. The chunks look scarier and harder to row through than sheets would, though, so this is probably why this choice was made by the painter. So again, you see an identification of an issue, a little bit of specific description from the text, and then discussion of it. Then we have the overall analysis at the end of the paragraph. These physical details might seem like minor things, but what's an actual student example? I didn't say it was perfect. When we're trying to teach kids history, it is important to be as accurate as possible. We don't want to put the wrong pictures in someone's head when they're young, because those things we learn when we're young tend to stick there forever. Then they had 2 more body paragraphs, 2 more issues. Washington standing in the boat. This is another, well, if you look at it, it only makes sense that if the wind is blowing as hard as it would take to make that flag fly back like that, these guys are working really hard to get that boat forward. Washington is standing up in the boat like a sail. He's going to be pushing the boat the wrong direction. It's not helpful. Probably didn't do that. And then the glorification of war. Why is he standing up, doing his best Captain Morgan pose? Because it looks more glorious. It looks, like we want our leaders to look, not sitting in the boat. So you can see the basic structure there. The conclusion then follows after that. Student, I'm guessing from what we've seen, the student recommended that this painting not be included in history textbooks for children anymore. Hopefully that helps with your understanding of the genre of textual analysis. If you have questions, email me.